chaos theory guarantees that we'll play like lightning shots, sounding like thunder. For every time in the face that it hits us, we're faster. Well, they should know by now. Can they see the world keeps trying to shake us? It only waits us. The pendulum swings. The pendulum swings. It's in a beautiful darkness. Napoleon another. It's full steam ahead. Full steam ahead. All aboard the Petty Express. Misdirected from the start. It's a runaway train. I come a freight train. I come a freight train. In a beautiful darkness, the Petty Express. In a beautiful darkness.
Well, welcome back to the Petty Express, everyone. We are going to see what the state brings to the table. If anything, if they've found, let's see, more evidence than, I swear, y'all, I saw Bigfoot. I swear, I done seen them. We don't know. Who knows if there's actually going to be, evidence beyond death by PowerPoint. Now, here's where maybe Mo got into a lot of trouble in high school because she has maybe a touch of all of the ADHD. But I hate to the depths of my soul, and this is why I would never sign up for. Does this character have a name? No, it's called CRPS, and I didn't feel like even raising my arms to do my hair, so I threw on a wig. That's basically what this is. I love wigs. Look, I'm not here to be a Jehovah's Witness, okay? That being said, you don't have to spend a heck of a lot of money. What I will say, if you are looking to maybe dabble in the wigs, look for something that has wig clips in it. It's just going to give you a tighter feel, and you won't have to use the wig glue, which will mean you have to wash your hair. And they do have ones that are, relatively inexpensive and fun. I'm not saying you have to go spend a gajillions of money on wigs, but if you want to try it, I say, invest $30, see if you like it. If not, you've lost $30, but haven't we all buying Bob Ross Chia Pets or whatever we like? But my big issue with a lot of closing arguments is the same issue I had with a lot of teachers. If you are simply going to be reading off of PowerPoint, I myself don't consider that teaching. I consider that my time would be better spent could you just forward me the PowerPoints? I can read quietly to myself in my home and get the same experience. I hate PowerPoints. Now, I understand the way I always did PowerPoints is I kind of had a bullet that would, you guys know my nebulas of thought. So basically, once I would see a word that would trigger sort of the chain of thought that I, was trying to speak about that point, but I wouldn't read off of my PowerPoint because that is torture that should be outlined in the Geneva Convention. Death by PowerPoint is a real thing. And it's just like, don't. Yes, and wash it, there's a lot of stuff, and as overwhelming as it seems, there's a lot of good YouTube channels that will teach you about wig care and styling and all that jazz. But if you're just looking for something casual, that's good too. So let's get into this, but I feel irritated that if we're just going to be watching Death by PowerPoint, I have to listen to this woman's chorus of and oh, and it's irritating. But let's see what the state brings forward, their final case. Not that it made a big daggone bit of difference, but let's see what our prosecutor in green. I will say I like this green color on her much better than the pink. I'm not a particular fan of pink, so I'm always quite biased, but there are people that look particularly well in pink. They look beautiful. It's their color. I don't think this particular lawyer looks great in Pepto-Bismol shade, but I think she looks much better in And this is one of my favorite colors, so of course I'm biased, but
Good afternoon. I'm the last voice that you want to hear for the city.
Understand.
wait, why? Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm the last voice that you want to hear for the city. And we get the opportunity to speak to you last because
Holy God, courthouses of America, I beseech you, and when I am president in 2028, remember, vote for Mo for president 2028. We've elected worse. Give me a shot. Anywho, could you possibly invest in lapel mics? Could you possibly invest in getting local college AV clubs in to look at your audio to make it? Because I understand, I like to walk around and fidget, or I used to when I was able to do walking. I wasn't a really standstill kind of person. And as you can tell, I talk with my hands a lot. So I understand that a lot of people are kinetic talkers, especially ones that are more narrative driven kind of storytellers or communicators. But you can get lapel mics. If Chandler Holderson's case in Wisconsin, can get a lapel mic for their attorney, this should be something that is easy. These are supposed to be public records. And it's a simple fix. Not a simple fix for me. Like, don't ask me to help with your audio. But, given someone with the right talents, this could be figured out because I do understand it. I am a kinetic talker. I like to kind of wander, stand up, sit down. So, actually sitting down all the time is really kind of a new thing for me. And I even tend to move my arms more just because usually I'm like shuffling or doing that kind of thing. But let's give this woman whatever. Now, I'm okay. Closing arguments. Why is it starting with that? Why are we starting with the closing? I swear, I love justice as a process, but sometimes playlists will scramble for no reason other than, I mean, I'm not, the technicalist, but okay, here we go. No, these are opening statements. Where is the, doggone it. I swear to goodness. Now, I think in Georgia, the defense goes first. I could be wrong because it looks like. But let's hear this incredible douche canoe. Oh, Lord. This man, molasses, has quicker moving than this man. The Mosey is strong with this one. Dear Lord, pray for us all.
So what's being depicted now is one of the first exhibits that we introduced. That is a photograph of Melissa John Wolfenbarger. And that's a photograph that was taken somewhere around 1997, a year before Melissa went missing. In 1998. We know that in 1998 she was 21 years of age. So she's roughly about 20 years old at that point. And even though she hadn't.
I find this incredibly crass, and I'll tell you why. So, the same state that did such a craptastic job as to lose very pivotal and real evidence that could have solved this case definitively is now using this young woman's death, the kind of emotions, this beautiful picture of this life lost, to persuade these jury members to care more than the state did. I mean, let's be very honest. The state did such a bad job that even Delphi's kind of giving them the side eye. So I find it incredibly in poor taste and with such grotesque manipulation of emotions for crass and callow reasons to use this young woman's loss of life, you know, as a weapon. It's just it's gross to me. And there you could have arguments, but instead you're just going to wave this picture around and I find it gross.
Gotten a chance to live a very long life. She was a mother at that point. She was a wife. And when I look at, when I see that photograph, I see a smile, but I also see hope. I see hope when I look at that photograph because of what she must have thought about her children.
Okay, sir, she was in a glamour shots probably outside a Kmart and an Orange Julius, all right? Let's not dig deeper into the glamour shot. It's tell me you don't have a case by telling me you don't have a case by bringing up her hopes and dreams in the first second. Again, this is not to discount that this is a tragedy, not only for her children, but, for her friends, and even, I hate that I have to say this, even for Norma and wherever she keeps her heart and soul, this is sad. But to use this in such a way is so grotesque.
What she hoped for them, the life that she hoped to live. And I think about the 27 years that have passed and how long that is to wait for justice. And that 27 years, that's a long time to experience life. That's a long time to fall down and get up, and fall down and get up. That's time to experience and have memories with your children. Children that don't have a memory of Melissa.
Okay, so here's the other thing. You can't discount the children's memory while also relying on the children's memory. And what I mean by that is, again, as jurors, you have to take into account that some of these jurors know children and know kind of what they're able to recall. And, again, to discount the children's memory and then to bring them up, remembering, oh, did your grandma take all the pictures away? Did your grandma say that they were going to go look for your mom? If at any point, say life changes, I become able to focus and I go through, law school and I decide to become a DA. This is an argument I would never bring in, mostly because do not bring children into this stuff. These children have been hurt and abused enough. Life has not dealt them a great thing. And if your case isn't strong enough that you have to bring in suffering children to win your case to bolster something, then you shouldn't have brought this case.
Joseph, not Christina. That's an opportunity to have and create memories with your grandchildren. That's 3 grandchildren that you heard Christina testify. She's got 3 boys. There's opportunities. That's what was missing. That's what has been missed. That is what has been taken away from us. The opportunities to have a life, to have those experiences. And she deserved that, even if she didn't want to stay with it.
Now, here's another thing that I will tell you as a jury member who is going to have the ADHD. Now, I know he's probably required to keep this ID badge, but now at this point in the trial, if I were actually in the jury, I am not listening to the state. So if he had wanted to grab my attention at any time, the fact that his ID badge is swaying means I have given myself absolutely no ability to pay attention. Again, when you have a very dense and detailed case, you do not want to give any distractions. People are not used to sitting still and having to pay attention to very dense things. I mean, this isn't like your normal college class. This is deciding a man's fate. So taking away anything that's distracting about your clothing or your appearance is really going to be helpful, because if you have a squirrel brain like me, I am just focused on his badge right now.
Even if she wanted to believe him, she still deserved to have an opportunity. She was manipulated. She was intimidated. She was abused.
Okay, here's the state. Where has the state shown that Chris manipulated her? Again, the state is requiring you to infer, and it's not beyond reasonable doubt. I'll give the state that. But the state is asking you to infer that in the time that the judge who was over or presiding over the temporary protective order let Christopher and Melissa talk to each other, and she ended up dissolving the temporary restraining order. Yes, there could be manipulation, but we don't have anything from Melissa, either a letter, a text, anything, a voicemail that says, yeah, Chris, said, if I don't drop this, this is going to happen. And, he's got that case coming up and I'm really scared of him. So, yes, these are logical things that you could think, okay, there are scenarios where that would happen, but you as the state shouldn't be coming up here with plausible scenarios.
And she was coerced to give up her children. I believe that's what the evidence shows. And I can tell you, 27 years later, I would not expect a judge to allow a defendant that buried his wife to be alone with them and speak to them 6 days after it happened. Roughly 5 to 6 days after they went down to apply for a protective order. 5 to 6 days after the order, and had no contract was in place, the judge lets her speak alone with him. And then on that very same day,
Yes, that was an poor thing, but again, you cannot judge. This is the big problem I have with people who judge history by today's morals. Yes, things that happened in the past was the worst, to quote, Simon from whatever various and sundry YouTube channels that he has about everything under the sun. Yes, the past was the worst, but they judged the people behind them as worser. We have always looked to the past and say we're better. I mean, eventually people in the future are going to look at us like we were absolute jackasses. So, yes, nowadays in family court, would that be allowed to happen? No, but it was allowed to happen then.
I want to dismiss. On that very same day, children go back with mom. And we don't know what was said. We don't know what was said. We don't know what he said to them. We don't even know if the bruises that were on her from his attack on July 21st, 1990, we don't even know if those are fully healed yet. I can assure you the mental and emotional trauma from that act. Having to call the police.
Okay, it's also something that rubs me wrong, and I am the first advocate, okay, for men can also be victims of, relationship violence. I fully believe that, but there is something that just rubs me wrong about this man saying stuff about this case when I'm sure he has, allowed plea deals for other, not so great people in all of his career. I guess there's just something about someone who has not walked through it, again, trying to explain what you walk through when you have been in one of these relationships, male or female, that just, I don't like the sort of cavalierness of it. And I do realize that I have it at 1.25, but there's sort of a glibness that just is, there's something that rubs me the wrong way, and that's the only way I can put it into words.
After a period of time in July, we know she had already been abused and experienced abuse. So when we think about domestic violence, when we think about being intimidated and coerced, that's what I want you to think about when we look back at that day, July 29th. I believe that in the show. She was intimidated. She was able to be influenced, especially after being beaten for a year by this defendant. And I don't believe that she ever intended to interrupt her children and walk away from her family, her children.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. This is something that the state has continued to lie about. And look, I am going to be very, very real with you guys. I have a hard time with Melissa giving up the rights to her children. It's just not something that I could ever, ever, ever do. Where I do praise Melissa is if she wasn't in a place where she could devote her entire life to her children, she at least made the loving decision to leave them with someone that could give them a better life. So I will never understand how she could have done it, how she could have chosen anything over her children. But she did give her children what she thought was the best option she could. And you know what? After covering Mornings with Mo, that's a hell of a lot better than a lot of the moms I cover. So, but there is going to be an objection from the defense. So you can go ahead and mark objection. You can mark dude, where's my case if you're playing Fulton fuckery bingo. And you can mark where's the case. So there you go. We've got objection, dude, where's my case? Where's the case? And I'm guessing the defense is really going to get on this because basically Christina did petition, yes, she did petition to the court to get the children back from Kathy. However, the court took a look at all the evidence, and since it was a family case, those records are sealed, and made the choice that the kids were going to stay with Kathy. And I don't know if it was something beyond that time then that she decided just to give the kids to Kathy. I don't know all of the various parts of that, but she did end up signing away her parental rights. So because the state hasn't gone through and shown, hey, here are, angry voice messages of Chris saying, hey, you better let my mom have the kids or else. You can't tell me that she was manipulated into giving her kids away when there is no proof. You can't take evidence or, the lack of evidence and say, well, because we don't have evidence, anything could happen. Spain could be anywhere. And welcome, Baker Raiders. We do have bingo, Fulton fuckery. This is the state's closing. And so far on the bingo cards, you have marked off, dude, where's my case? Where's the case? And objection.
I want to object to counsel's repeated use of I believe. I can assure you. Counsel is not supposed to interject personal opinion.
Understood. Mr. Fustet has offered to rephrase. Go ahead.
Now, the indictment you'll get will have one count of murder, for the malice, murder, the intent to kill, was done while apart. And this is why we're here. From what was found.
Okay, no. Dear God, no. Okay, this is the shit I'm talking about. If I'm the jury, I'm turning my chair around at this point, because if this is what your closing statement is, send me the PowerPoint so I don't have to listen to your voice. There is nothing that I find more disrespectful than basically not knowing your ish enough to have to write it out on your PowerPoint so you have to read it off to me. Now, I know this is crazy, but I am actually semi-literate, so I'd rather read to myself.
On April 29th, 1999, and June 3rd, 1999. Stolen Mr. Wolfenbarger, his job, communities within that same vicinity. And it would have been a minute from the residence where Christopher Wolfenbarger and Mr. Wolfenbarger lived. And your judge is going to instruct you that you are duty bound to follow the law, and in your consideration of the law, you should consider certain things you should not consider, such as sympathy for either the victim in this case.
Disagreeing with the law. I do love that they put this out there, because you absolutely are free to do basically whatever in the nebulous fuck that you want as the jury. Now, that being said, if they do find out that you conspired to nullify a jury verdict, you can get in a lot of trouble. So you didn't hear this from me, and I would never give you any legal advice, because first of all, I'm a YouTuber on the internet. That's like taking stock advice from Amaranth. I mean, if it works, it works, but it's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see how it works out for you.
Or the defendant, disagreement with the law, conjecture, dislike of the system, television, public opinion, penalty or punishment. The only thing that you are to decide when you're considering the evidence is whether or not the state has met its burden beyond a reasonable doubt. and prove her guilt or innocence of the guilt of this defendant. You should consider the elements of the crime, the law which the judge will give you. The oath that you take as jurors backs the case as presented in the form of testimony, video exhibits such as.
Okay, I say this from the depths of my soul, but this looks like I created it. And look, I would be very proud of this, but do they not have interns that have Canva? If I can make funny music video songs with my level of technology, some intern somewhere should be able to make a better PowerPoint. And thank you. This is Sarah for gifting one membership, and that went to Miss Peanut 87. Welcome to the Church of Mo. We have dark chocolate sarcasm and seances occasionally, but only when we want to talk to Miss Cleo. Let's continue. Although we might get more solid and, coherent information from Miss Cleo at this point than this attorney.
The video of the defendant hiding, audio exhibits such as the audio of the defendant stating that you have to look for, acknowledging that he took assault, also acknowledging that she was dating someone and seeing someone and staying with someone they might. She also considered the credibility of witnesses. What was it like when they were testifying? How did they answer questions? You are entitled, you're the determinant of the credibility of not just the state's witnesses, but also the witnesses that the defendant called.
Okay, I'm just throwing it out there, state, but when you have like your star witness being Norma, I'm going to throw out there that maybe you don't want to bring credibility to the front and center. Maybe you want to say like, hey, remember our witnesses? Perhaps don't.
I'll consider what the defense is. Now, the defendant doesn't have to present any defense. Walk into court, Tuesday, Wednesday, say, hey, make a proof. But that's not what happened in this case. The defense in this case is Carl Patton. Listen to the period opening statement. The defense in this case is Carl Patton killed Melissa Wolfenbarger. Other than the fact that evidence came in that Carl Patton committed murders, what other piece of evidence?
Okay, now let me bring out the whiteboard of truth on this one, because State Attorney, I don't think you're understanding. All right, so if the Venn diagram, kind of goes like this, and over here are just, normies. And, here's Carl and Norma. I'm sorry, but where they intersect is a whole lot, murdery. I'm sorry. Pay no attention to the serial unalivers to the left. Nothing to see here. He's like, what is there in evidence, that they had anything to do with anything? I mean, the fact that they dumped people in trash bags, I mean, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but... And yes, that is correct. If you got whiteboard, mark it off. But sure, I mean, other than the fact that they're, responsible for 5 people shuffling off this mortal coil, what evidence is that Norma and Carl weren't great people?
In fact, anything that you heard during the course of this week, what points to that? What other facts would allow you to create that evidence? Other than the fact that he killed someone, the evidence came in, Melissa didn't even know about it. The only thing that's come in about the relationship between the Pattons and their children is that they appear to love each other. That's not so unbelievable.
Okay, wait. Yes, they appear to love each other. We have the unfortunate, baby corpse that was found there, the constant running away, the fact that the parents were serial unalivers. I mean, but it was just a normal family. It was your everyday middle class, American dream.
Based off of the letters that Melissa wrote, cards that she wrote, times that she wanted to take her father, Carl, and her mother, Norma, out to lunch. Those are going to be back in the room if you observe and look at while you deliberate. This case is just simply not about.
Okay, wait. So the state's case, if I can get this correctly, is the Hallmark, well, I guess the Hallmark prosecution. If anyone in a bad relationship has ever written a nice card to the other person, I guess whenever they break up, no matter how bad the relationship, I guess that person can bring up, Hallmark cards and explain that it was always great.
Carl Patton as much as they want it to be. This case is about domestic violence. This case is about intimidation. This case is about loss of control. The loss of control that this defendant had over custody of his children and over Melissa.
He too signed away. They had both relinquished any nebulous idea of taking care of their children at that point. From what I've gathered from the evidence in this case, Chris effed on off too. So are you telling me that this man who seemed to have effed on off as well, took the life of his ex-wife who had effed on off from the children to retain custody of said children she'd signed away? I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but make it make sense.
No matter how much they want this case to be about Carl Patton, this case has nothing to do with Carl Patton, other than the fact that he asked law enforcement to find his daughter. Why does Norma go to the residence of Kathy Wolfenbarger?
Because Norma is evil and hateful looking, and oh my God, Norma is never your litmus test for normal. I cannot imagine any worse witness to highlight ever in a case ever. And that does include Darrell Brooks referencing God in his closing statement, saying that he would excuse, forged escapes, in general.
Looking for Melissa, raising attention to that issue they're responsible for. Now, a lot of facts have come to evidence in this case. I would ask you to put weight on more the facts that have been corroborated. Like that. You heard that from Norma. You don't have to just take Norma's word for it because you heard that from Christina. She does not have a lot of memory from her childhood. She doesn't have to remember her mother, but she remembers that day. Because that's
And I don't blame, and we will watch Christina maybe tomorrow, her testimony, depending on how far we get with the closing statements and the verdict. I don't blame Christina. Again, you grow up your entire life, and maybe this hasn't been a subject you're allowed to talk about. And Norma comes right out of the wings and says, "You've been lied to all your life." I'm sure Christina probably feels like she is fighting for her mother and she is fighting to get the justice. And how dare Norma manipulate that very human, very, loving sort of instinct to, advocate for her mother she barely remembers, to twist it into something to exonerate her husband. It's just gross. Again, this entire case never should have been brought. It is a travesty, and the DA should really have to explain how they brought this case, how and why they thought they could bring this case, basically guaranteeing that Melissa will never get justice.
stood out. Where's my daughter?
Yes.
I could just imagine how that was. It wasn't a calm statement. It was screaming, where's my daughter? Norma probably showed up at that residence of Kathy in a panic. Where's my daughter? That's something that Christine would remember. And that's why you should believe that happened. And that's why that theory is just plain what it is. He killed Melissa Lockwood.
Oh, for the love of God, how much longer does this go on?
Most importantly, your common sense. It's the main thing the graph was used inside of this case. What does the evidence tell you? What the facts tell you? What's been presented? The judge is also going to charge you on what reasonable doubt is and what it is. Just going to charge you that the state is not required to prove the doubt of the guilt of the defendant beyond all doubt for mathematical certainty.
No. Okay, here's your problem, state. You I don't know how, but you were able to, we are going to call Guinness because you were able to limbo under the bar of mediocrity such to the point that you achieved the inexplicable achievement of doing barely 10% of a half-assed job. I mean, it is astounding the level of mediocrity you just slumped to. I mean, scientists will be studying this for years. Okay, we're doing about another 5 minutes of this before I pluck out my audio sensory capabilities.
Reasonable doubt is doubt with fair-minded, impartial juror, honestly seeking the truth. Is a doubt based on common sense and reason. It does not mean a vague or arbitrary doubt, like Carl Patton. A arbitrary, not supported by the facts, thrown out, hoping to stick on the wall. Evidence may be direct or circumstantial, or both. Consider the evidence, you may use your reasoning and common sense to make deductions and reach conclusions. May be direct or circumstantial. Direct evidence is that which may be seen or heard, otherwise direct sense. So when Christina says, I saw Norma show up to the residence in a panic looking for her daughter, that's direct evidence of her observations. And from that recollection, the testament of Norma, you can infer that Norma was sincere when she was looking for her daughter. The types of inferences that you can infer from the facts that have been presented. And then we have the circumstantial evidence. This is exactly what I was referring to. We got direct evidence of tool marks on bones that were recovered and identified as the remains of Melissa Wolfenbarger. Tool marks are direct evidence. Those observations, you'll have those that you will be able to review and look at while you deliberate. We also have direct evidence that the defendant was in possession of assault. Two separate facts. Now you wouldn't, and we wouldn't walk into court on Wednesday and ask you to convict because there are tool marks on the bones that remains of Melissa Wolfenbarger. And we wouldn't ask you to walk in here on Wednesday when we start presenting evidence to convict this defendant of murder because he was in possession of assault. Can you draw logic?
Here's the thing. The anthropologist was not even able to distinctly, match the tool markings to. Look, I'm not a toolologist. I'm just going to draw a vague picture of what the tool or what the saw looks like because, look, Mr. Mo doesn't let me play with power tools. Probably a great idea. But, okay, so let me embiggen me. But this is the type of saw it was. So it's one of those, you got the handle and, look, I didn't work on home improvement, so I have no idea. But it was this kind of saw, and they weren't able to match the, saw blade marks to the disarticulation points. So so is everyone that goes to Home Depot or has a saw now implicated? We're watching about 5 more minutes, and then he's going to make me lose my sanity.
Common sense conclusion. That's just one piece of the evidence that has been presented, which you were able to do that. We have saw around the same time that the wife was missing, his wife's remains were located. The medical examiner says there's the saw that we presented is Exhibit 66. It's consistent with the type of marks that could be made by that instrument. And in his own statement that
Consistent doesn't mean conclusive. And here's the big thing. And I do think that the state, but it's also something that anyone can use, as persuasive language. But consistent with does not mean conclusive as. And because of a lot, people are interested in this stuff. We can tell that LawTube growing, that people are interested in the science behind, crime and criminology and things like that. But the way it's presented on mainstream media or by the state is that, consistent with is, conclusively matched to. And that is not the same. And a lot of work needs to go into kind of explaining that. And I think sometimes because lawyers are so used to talking to other lawyers that they take some things as kind of like gravity, like Newton's laws, like everyone is going in with this perspective already because it's been ingrained in them since law school or even before when they were, aspiring to law school, that this is how they would be, made to see things with the way our justice system. But I think that sometimes lawyers can forget how colloquially things are interpreted, how a juror might, interpret consistent with to be, oh, that's it, that's 100% that, and how to combat that. Some lawyers are really good at that, but I do think that, I do think a lot of law in the future is going to have to focus on bridging the gap between the legal stuff that they must do as a lawyer and really connecting with juries.
He was in possession of it around that time and then stick with the blocks. Although they were reluctant to say so, that they never got that saw back. We would not ask you to convict solely based on that fact alone, but that is a fact that you can consider, and those are inferences that you can draw. Reasonable, common sense inferences. So this is what I saw when I woke up this morning. I probably see this a lot more than most people, but when I woke up, this is what I saw. And I had time, so I stopped by to get some gas. And by the
Oh, Lord. Okay. Now, this is the part where he would have completely lost me as a jury member because I am just trying to get through your boring statement that I don't trust anyway. I mean, at this point, I will be honest with you. If I'm in the jury, there is very little this man can say to change my opinion. And welcome. That this man could do to salvage his case at this point. But going into the personal story when I could care, I care more about the bowel movements of Furbies in the wild than I do about whatever the nebulous F this man did in the morning. I'm like, you are forcing me to pay attention, look at your stupid ass PowerPoint, and you want to talk about you getting gas? Like the rage I would be feeling as a juror at this point would be, solar levels, incandescent, if you will.
time I finished, I got back and I crunked up a car, and I'm back.
Okay, I'm not a carologist, but what the hell is crunking up a car? Is that starting it? Does he have the little push button? Does he have like like the 19, Model T? Does he have to, get the little handle out and go? Again, not a carologist, but I guess you can go ahead and mark translator on your bingo card.
Back and forth. So I never saw anything going to my vehicle. But during that period, I smelled what appeared to be gas because I cut grass, I smelled gas. There's a
Have faith in the Lord and Valvoline. What? Okay, I'm done with this man. This is what you'll get on the Petty Express. Mo's weaponized ADHD will only handle a certain level of absolute reject stupidity, and then she will stop. So we will be going to the defense because no, I'm out. I am not going to take the legal case of, and therefore by Valdon, or Mobile X, he is guilty.
Mr. McDermott, does the defense wish to make a closing statement?
Yes,
Closing
Your Honor.
argument? Thank you.
All right, we can mark ponytail lawyer. And you can mark death by PowerPoint. Ooh, someone has main character energy. Someone was like, I use PERT. I am feeling fabulous.
Just a short word about how this works. The state gets to split their argument. So they'll make an argument, I get to make an argument, they get the last word too. Okay, first word, last word, and I won't get rebut that. That's just the way it is. We accept that. You've all taken an oath. And you've taken an oath, and the judge will instruct you in just a minute. Not my words, not their words. The law that will require you to decide this case based on the evidence.
Okay, I'm already irritated, and this is just me. And again, maybe it's because I do have weaponized ADHD, but no one ever connects with anyone while reading. And as this defense attorney, you are dealing with, I mean, it is not hard to be more entertaining than these two, okay? Start with a story. Don't get directly into the tough legalese. At least in my opinion, it's not a great way, especially after a jury's already listened to Timu, Johnny Cochran bloviate for an hour and a half, and they have to deal with that woman at the end. You just give them something a meaty hook. And it doesn't have to, I mean, look at this case. You have Red Rum, unalive her parents. You got Tina, the Waffle House quadrangle of love. You've got, the final witness who's like, your lawyerness, I kind of have an age problem, and because I was high. I mean, this case has all the stories in it. I think it's a shampoo. Or it used to be.
Based on evidence. You remember in my opening statement, I told you that the state has got gaping holes in its case.
Georgia, come to the front of the congregation. You need to explain your nightlife because I got questions. Also, phrasing. I'm okay with the word moist, but somehow gaping is one of those words to me. Like most people, it's moist. Gaping is that word, like it's going to be stricken from the interwebs if I ever get in power. Yes, you can mark I was high now.
And the state is going to give you bits and pieces of evidence. And then it is going to tell you a story to fill those in the way that suits them. And it's going to ask you to imagine along with them that that story is true. And it's going to ask you to make a leap of logic at the end of it, from alleged instances of abuse to murder.
And thank you. This is Sarah. I hereby grant you a BS, BA in professional noticing. Congratulations. Yeah. So if you guys want to hear a funny story about noticing, so because I used to work in a physical therapy pool, and part of the things that we really worked with patients was their gait, like walking correctly so that all the body mechanics are correct. Thank you so much. And, you have a strong core, and basically you're walking the best way you can in order to have less pain. That was something that we worked with people a lot. And because of this, my weird sort of quirk is that I noticed the way people walk. And I was at the college tour with my middle daughter, and, most people can keep these sort of tismy thoughts to themselves. But I had noticed this entire time as this young lady is taking us around the tour, and she was super, super duper sweet and really nice and answered all my daughter's question. But basically in her walk, now it's really strange, you don't see this a lot, but she would only twist out with her right foot. So it was interesting because she would have a straight on gait with her left foot, but every mid step as she was bringing it forward, she would really pronate to the left on her right foot, or outwards on her right foot. And I was like, oh, she needs to watch that, especially if she's going into nursing, because she's really going to hurt her hip. And then me being the tismy person that I am, I'm like, sorry, I noticed that you pronate with your right foot, as everyone uses when they're trying to break the ice with fellow people. I'm like, hello, I noticed your gait was odd. I'm super popular everywhere.
And I have asked you to follow your oath, to follow the law, to decide the case based on the evidence, not on the imagination. Let's talk about the evidence a little bit. You've been told about the difference between direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. I won't rehearse the story, the lesson. What hard evidence exists in this case? I will submit to you that not one bit of direct evidence in this case points to that man right there. Not one.
Yeah. I'll give the defense that there are not distinct circumstantial evidence that tie Chris. But to be very fair, very real, and objective, there was a history of allegations of DV. So there were potentialities for a motive. There was a fact that maybe Chris would have been upset about, the Waffle House romance. So, I do understand what the defense is saying here, but there were things that, if the state had brought a scintilla of evidence in, it would have been easier to try to justify this. And thank you so much, you guys. I just didn't feel like doing my hair today. I will tell you, this cold snap is not doing me any good. I was promised global warming, damn it. And this, I do understand we're in November. It's not like I'm new to rural Indiana. So we've had a pretty mild year, but now it's all cold and I'm not liking it.
I'm not saying there's no direct evidence in this case. There's lots of it. There is obviously the remains. There is the manner in which those remains were recovered. We had the head discovered in the street on April 29th. We're not exactly sure how it got there. One detective thinks there was a great rain event that washed it out. Another one says there was a dog. We don't know. And then about a month later or so, they discovered several bags in the wooded lot behind the trucking business. Some people call it junkyard. Go back to that. Medical exam.
Okay, I do kind of feel vindicated, and you guys, look, this is just, Mo gets vindication. Now, as I have complained, and of course I have a wig on, which, can we talk about bangs being Satan? Women, let me talk to you. Come here, close to me. Now, listen, I love, glam as much as the next person, but bangs are awful. Stop letting the fashion industry, tempt us to have bangs, because you know what we end up looking like every night, no matter how you do your bangs, no matter how the stylist does it. This is how they end up looking. At the end of the day, unless you're a hairstylist with the power of Jesus, you end up looking like, Peppermint Patty. Okay? So unless they're a wig and or you have, sold your soul to the Dark Lord, just say no to bangs. I don't know where I was going with that, but I remember now. The train of thought has come back. If you have train of thought rolled back around or something to that effect, you can mark it. That little wild, giblet of hair that always sneaks out like you're trying to have a smooth ponytail and you get this C curl around your ear. I'm finally glad that this man is dealing with that. I feel like he's gotten away with way too many, good hair days.
Come back to that. The medical examiner eventually is able to identify the skull using dental records, dental charts, and notes that there are tool marks, of course, on the body parts. After some time goes by, we also know that there was a search of Christopher's former residence. There was lots of evidence taken from this. Lots of evidence that came from the remains. As we talked about before, there were paint chips in the hair. There were human hairs, apparently not Melissa's. There were pubic hairs. There was egg hair. There was DNA. There were carpet fires. There's lots of evidence. And you heard the detective sit there and tell you, we specifically sent this off for testing. Some of it more than once. Whoever's hair that was in there that wasn't Melissa's was also not his. Whoever's pubic hair that was also not his. Wherever those paint chips came from, it was not from his residence.
So in the bag, I'm trying to put this delicately because it's not easy. So when you put a body part or let's say groceries in a bag, basically there was trace evidence. There were pubic hairs, there were strands of hair, and there were paint chips that neither matched Melissa or Chris. So there is nothing forensically tying this to him. I mean, again, I could understand if maybe he had also worked at a paint factory, like that's how they got the Green River Killer, is because of the microscopic, bits of paint on victims and on his clothing and all over that linked him, to all of these people. But them, just ignoring all this trace evidence because they want to go with Chris because it's easier, and it means that they can kind of gloss over these, glaring inaccuracies or inadequacies in their investigation is really a miscarriage of justice.
Someone says, oh, it was remodeled. It may have been remodeled, but folks, when you paint over paint, the old paint's still under there. You go scrape a paint sample, you're going to get all of it. None of it matched. There was luminol evidence. It sprayed the entire house, not a drop. And finally, the more modern DNA taken from the bag. You heard Detective Stein sit there and talk about the event where they went out with all the media to the site, looked at the proximity to where Christopher had worked. You heard him testify about the DNA in the bag, and he read the results of those reports. Yes, we found DNA. Yes, there was a vial.
This is the part of the story that doesn't make sense to me because, and look, I know criminals don't make sense. I know I do mornings with Mo, like seriously, that it's, job security for me. But I do know people are lazy and don't tend to go out of their way to do stuff for no reason, unless you're Taylor Shabusiness. But why do you go through the effort of, well, I mean, not important, doing, okay, why do you go through the effort of having a person and your main reason for disarticulation or decapitation and, removal of limbs is to prevent identification? So you're telling me that someone went through the time and effort to disarticulate Melissa, double bag each of her limbs, maybe take the torso to a completely different area, again to avoid detection, but then is going to put the body right next to his house? I mean, I'm not, look, I also am the same person that will look for my glasses while wearing them, looking for my glasses. So I'm not saying that I adhere to any litmus test of logic either, but it just seems like someone went through a hell of a lot of effort to make sure that Melissa would not be able to be identified, either because of decomposition or, dismemberment, than to put her right next to where the alleged, dismemberer, what? I don't know.
Profile that represented 5 people. Two of them at least were male. And they submitted Christopher's DNA sample. They went up specifically again to get new DNA from him and submit it for that test. That was in 2022 or so. Christopher willingly submitted. Yeah, he knew the DAs were still investigating him. He didn't run from it when they called him and said, hey, we'd like to get your DNA. And he submits it, and you heard the results of the test. Christopher Wolfenbarger is excluded from being a contributor. Well, that's when we hear this theory about there's a great rain flood event.
Okay, this is another pet peeve, but that's because I'm too type A to function, and if I were a lawyer, I wouldn't be able to do this. But the fact that he doesn't have his notes like sticky tabbed and ready to go, I am a walking ball of anxiety most of the time. So having to flip through stuff, like the amount of back sweat just rolling down my spine and boob sweat at this point would be totally like I would not be sure. So like sure, unsure, I'm just drenched like Mary Catherine Gallagher from Saturday Night Live. And one thing that keeps me from showing that is have everything itemized to my very, neurotic way. Because if I'm flipping through stuff, this has just thrown me off.
I gave this page from the weather reports. The National Climatic Data Center for the City of Atlanta in April of 1999. I gave it to Detective Shepard. And you saw him pretend he couldn't. I believe it's gone. I gave it to the detective. And you saw him pretend, oh, I'm not comfortable reading this. This document's going to go back with you into evidence. And you all can look at it.
And thank you for gifting 10 memberships, maybe not. And those went to, let me see, Kim Dodds. It's Comagon. Let's see, I have my favorites. MCH Cheesehead. Let's see here. Dean Johnson, Velu86. Joe Schmo, user KX48 or 4H4. Look, I'm sorry, letters. I have dyslexia, dyscalculia, and apparently English as a 37th language. Rogue Mama and Debbie Marie. Sorry for the mispronunciation. I graduated before No Child Left Behind. It is what it is. Thank you so much. Welcome to the Church of Mo. We have dark chocolate sarcasm and, well, Mo saying whatever comes to our mind, honestly, most of the time.
There's a single one of you who can't figure it out, I would be shocked. The days go down here, the days of the month, the hours of the day go this way, and at the end there's a cumulative total of the rainfall for each day. And you'll be able to look at this document and see that on that day, the other deputy who said there was an intermittent mist was correct. There was roughly a quarter of an inch of rain for the entire day. And most of it appears to have fallen at about 3 o'clock in the morning, long before that had appeared on the road that day. And you can look up the rest of the way, 00.
Have a great lunch, Wolfram. Thank you for all of your Modly Mod duties. They're greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
0000000. Detective Shepard. Oh, it rained so much that month. No, it didn't. They analyzed the carpet fibers. They could find no match for towels. So then we're told about the circumstantial evidence. It's interesting to me that you just heard the district attorney tell you all the facts and evidence in this case point to one man. But he's not talking about this hard evidence, is he? Because there's a bunch of that, and not a single bit of it points to this man. All of it points away from this man. But Detective Shepard, or maybe it was Detective Calhoun, one of the two, got on the stand and said, there's only been one suspect in this case from day one. Well, when the results keep pointing away and pointing away and pointing away, maybe there should have been a different one. Maybe you should have asked some more questions of the neighbors or the family. You heard the district attorney here tell you. That's how we conduct investigations. We look at the person's life. We want to find out what's going on in their life. They never investigated that family. They never investigated anybody else.
And that's the really upsetting thing. Again, Look, I know. Look, I'm biased against Norma. I don't think she knows the truth or goodness if it smacked her on the head and sprayed her with holy water and a super soaker. But Melissa deserved justice. She deserved to have detectives who actually gave a crap about her. And it seemed like the detectives, the police department, no one gave a damn.
Where are the records of the tests of paint chips for a single other person's house? Where are the records for a search warrant from a single other individual's house? Where are the search warrants getting hair or pubic hair or DNA from anybody else in this investigation? Crickets.
And you can go ahead and mark off on your bingo card alternate suspects. And this case is cursed.
Because they want to tell you a story about domestic violence. I'm a supporter of Me Too.
I'm a supporter of the evidence movement. Look, I don't trust women. I don't trust men. I trust evidence. And I'm sorry that have been women that have, broken that for everyone. But since humanity, we have lied to each other about everything from, does my butt look big in this? To, sweetie, you can have as much cheesecake as you like. No one will notice. So,
Domestic violence is a real thing. You've heard the district attorney tell you multiple times now, this is a case about domestic violence. It may have that question in it somehow. Certainly it does. It is an issue you're going to have to decide. You're going to have to decide how much weight to attribute to those alleged incidents. And you're going to have to decide, as a fact finder and determiner in this case, how it fits into the overall picture. But this is not a case about domestic violence.
go take care of little man.
This is a
Have a
case in
great
which a man is
day.
charged with an act of murder. And the state has not given you one single instance or bit of evidence about an act of murder. They want to get you sympathetically on the board after he tells you, don't judge this by symptom. But then he wants to tell you all these violent instances, and he wants to embellish them. He punched her. That's not an evidence anymore. He beat her all the time for the whole year. That's not an evidence anymore. And they want to tell you that story and then ask you to make the leap to there must have been some act of murder also. What about these instances of domestic violence? We heard from first about the July 1998 incident. Yes, there's a police report. We had a police officer testify. He told you he did not look under her clothing. How could he have known if there were scrapes on her back or backside? He told you that. I didn't look at that. We get home and Norma says, well, I got home with her, she had scrapes all down her backside. Just after she had gotten done telling me that she was wearing blue jeans. I'm not sure how you get scrapes if you fall on the ground with blue jeans on. You have reports from Tina. Tina says she came in there with...
Oh, yeah. And Tina, you can go ahead and mark down Fulton County vibes because Tina is pronounced by the Patton family as Tina. I shit you not, you guys. Tina. I mean, and I thought that it was just an accent or a Georgia thing. No, everyone else in the case calls her Tina. The Patton family calls her Tina. I'm not a good speller, y'all, but I didn't do that to my children, okay?
choke marks on her neck. And there was another guy named Clinton who stood up for her. None of that story is corroborated by anybody else anywhere. The only person who's ever told that story is Tina Patton. Tina says she took Melissa back up to Chris's house on Brookline and confronted Christopher. But Christopher tells Detective Stott in his interview that he didn't like Melissa staying with her sister, because she got her into cigarettes and also was doing meth.
I believe it's spelled like normal. Actually, I think it's Tina with an E for reasons that only Norma understands. So I think it's Tena. I'll have to look it back up again, because I know I was just like, what in the cursed trial is this?
Not necessarily that Melissa was doing it, but that he didn't like Melissa around next time. Well, I think there would be a confrontation if she brought her up there. We've heard from Mr. Dixon about domestic violence. It is funny to me. You should find it incredible that when he gives an interview in 2003 to the police about Melissa, he does not one time mention abuse, marks on her body, being drugged on the sidewalk, her complaining about her husband. He does not mention it one single time in an hours-long interview.
That was probably a language faux pas. And I get where he's going with it. So, in grammatical, or at least contextually and vocabularily, it is incredible would have been probably the better statement. In the Bradley Yawn, not credible sort of definition of it. God, when I'm referencing Bradley Yawn as for context and vocabulary, I get, because there are sort of these language creoles or these little quirks, and they don't quite go there. But he should have said, the state is asking you to co-sign this relationship that they gave you no evidence about.
And suddenly, when they find him, the last minute before trial, they find out he's been watching true crime shows about this, and suddenly he remembers this incident where she had bruises and she was drugged on the sidewalk. The testimony is not credible from a former Waffle House employee and bank robber, Mr. Dixon.
The state could have had better witnesses. They had the next door neighbor who was like, oh yeah, I played with Christopher all the time in the neighborhood, and then she's like, I plead the fifth to all of her crimes, and then Melissa's other love interest, the erstwhile bank robber and Waffle House Lothario, Mr. Cooley, or whatever his name was.
You heard evidence from Miss Cooley. Lived across the street. She seemed to be confused about a lot of her facts. Testimony was difficult to follow. But she says, oh yeah, I heard screaming and breaking glass over there all the time. There was apparently no glass left in the house. Definitely from that house. Definitely that house where Chris lived. And I know that because that's the house I went in and cleaned. I cleaned all the houses that Mr. Holyfield owned. Who's Mr. Holyfield? Holyfield didn't own that house. You heard testimony from several people. That house was owned by Christopher's parents. Miss Cooley was never in there. I think Miss Cooley's confused as to what she's talking about. But well, I definitely saw a black eye behind the glasses. And then she said a few moments later, I only saw her passing a few times when she was getting in the car to go to the grocery store. Never talked to her, just said hi. Testimony about assault. Oh, he had access to assault phone. Well,
Okay, so he's not saying cell phone, or it's actually a saw. For some reason, the closed captions don't know.
their memory seems to be just as cloudy and hazy as a lot of people. And this is a 26-year-old case, that's understandable. But I look at the statements that were made, and I see at least 4 different versions of that story that have been told. In the original detectives reports, they said a saw went missing while Chris worked there. And we thought it was Chris. We blamed Chris. And we never found it. And then later it turned into he stole a saw. And then later they backed off and said, well, no, he asked to borrow a saw, and we never gave it back. You heard them, their own witness they had to impeach by playing things that were in audio, because they said they didn't even remember saying that. And they testified here that he took a saw, not saying he stole it, whatever. And she didn't even remember talking to me a couple weeks before that, before trial.
To be fair, sometimes I walk into a room and I don't even remember. Hell, it doesn't even take a room. I get up and I'm walking toward my vanity, which is only like 4 feet away, or well, I guess longer. I'm bad at spatial stuff, probably 10 feet away. And I've even forgotten from, standing up in 10 feet what I'm supposed to be going to the vanity for. So I'm not going to hold that she forgot something within a week, sir. Look, I can do that within 10 seconds.
She didn't remember telling me on the phone, but yeah, he brought it back. My apologies. Circumstantial evidence about alleged conflicts in Christopher's statement. What conflict did you hear in his statement? Inconsistencies, that was the word. There were inconsistencies in Christopher's interviews. And they play for you the interview with Mr. Stott, 2001, and then they play for you the interview with Detective Shepard in 2021. In one version of those stories, in the 2001 interview, Chris tells that the last time he ever saw Lisa, she was walking down Lee Street by the MART station. And he stopped to pick her up, took her up the road to Taco Bell. It's right by the interstate. And when they were done talking, apparently she talked about wanting to get back together. He said that was too emotional for him at this point, and he dropped her off back at the train station. And she left back north. Lee Street, MART station. How far is that from Christopher's house? Because when these new investigators came in 2021 and tried to trip him up with this stuff, all these details from 18 years or 20 years prior, they asked him a specific question. Do you remember telling him the last time you saw her, she was walking down Brookline Street? I'd be a little confused too, because he never said that. Now, whether he remembered the other statement from up Lee Street or not, I don't know. But again, you're 20 years later. Is Christopher the only one in this entire trial that doesn't get a pass on memory? When witness after witness is standing here and say, I can't remember that, I don't recall. At least the police officers get to carry their report with them and read the details and pretend they remembered it.
I don't like this argument. I don't like this argument presented this way. I would say that Chris isn't the only one that seemed to experience a bit of inconsistencies when trying to remember things. Look to the state's witness. Kind of putting in, he doesn't do snarky well. Like not Adam, daggone it. Alan Jackson cannot kind of weave in the snark and it doesn't stop his flow. David Yannetti can also weave it in and it doesn't stop his flow. This guy is like, ooh, I'm gonna tell a funny. It just kind of, it seems to stop him up, and I wish he would just have better flow.
This business about hiding. Oh, Christopher cooperated with police time after time after time. I don't have to list it all tediously again. All the DNA results, the hair, the pubic hair, everything else. Every time they called him and said, we want this, he showed up. They could have showed up at his door that day. He would have walked out to them. They could have arrested him right there. But they chose to use some kind of SWAT team enforcement with unmarked cars, no lights, If you ever see the video again, you will notice when those cars pull up, no lights are on. Later in the video, when they're all up at his house, then they have their lights on. They don't turn it on until later. No marks on those cars. The only marked car was all black with black letters. So if you're viewing that coming up your driveway, and armed men get out with M16s, what are you going to do? Walk out and greet them?
Okay, this is a bad fact for his case. I mean, it does kind of indicate that Chris was feeling a little guilty, when he saw police. Because, yes, reasonably, but he's forgetting that Chris was well aware that he was being investigated for red rum. So it's not like he was, Joe Schmo, just, looking at the old Marmaduke comics, and getting ready to help, Mrs. Jill Schmo with the crossword puzzle, and all of a sudden, SWAT comes out. Chris was aware that he was being investigated for a fairly, grievous crime. So kind of missed me with not every car was marked. I mean, it's a bit of a stretch of the imagination, even if I do believe that the state overstretched a bit. It's a little hard for you to sell me on, I was afeared for my life. Again, yes, if SWAT rolled up right now to me, it would be, yeah, I would piddle my pants right here, right now. No lies, no shame. 6 kids does not a strong bladder make. But if you're being investigated for like the red rum and dismemberment of your ex-wife, the fact that, law enforcement is coming around your house is not shocking, I think, to the point where you have to hide.
Look, it was rational to fear that, okay? It's rational to be afraid. Imagine if you're seeing that through a home security video, and you can have even less resolution. And so in order to connect their stories about domestic violence, to embellish them, and then create a story that somehow leads to a murder, they bring in domestic violence expert. And she tells us what she tells us. Much of it may be valid in certain contexts. And she says, well, if you're leaving, that's a sign of domestic abuse. But if you're returning, we can also explain that as domestic abuse.
Yeah, so the expert, I know I did not like the expert, but I think the expert failed to kind of put out that every single case, every relationship that has, intimate partner violence isn't going to look the same. So, what you see in one case doesn't mean it's in every case, and they have to kind of put all of these variables in because it's very unique and individualized. And good morning, Dory Robertson.
And if you're at any point in this cycle, virtually any behavior can be explained as part of the cycle of abuse. And Ms. Hilton gave very pointed hypotheticals, clearly designed to apply to this case. And she says, yes, clearly that's domestic abuse. Yes, clearly that's isolating somebody. Yes, clearly that's reconciliation. Yes, yes, yes. No hesitation whatsoever. But when the defense just tweaked the hypothetical just a little bit, her answer was what? Yes? No? No, her answer was, I don't know. I need more facts. I need to know what the abuse situation is. And wait a minute. How can you jump on a hypothetical when she asked it, and when we ask it, we get him hauled around? And it turns out she's a former employee of the DA's office. She's effectively like having an extra prosecutor up there on the stand to hit softballs they throw at her. So what you have happen is you have the state telling you a story that they want you to believe that leads to a murder for which they have no evidence, an act for which they have no evidence, an intent for which they have no evidence, and an unlawful killing for which they have no evidence. And they want you to follow their story to judge something based on no evidence. And all the other evidence in the case that points away from Christopher, every bit of hard evidence in the case that points away from Christopher.
I wish this had been more of the bulk of his talking. This is the part that matters. Again, the state said that they would prove this. Where is the evidence of anything? Do you believe Norma, the woman that has a Netflix, or had a Netflix contract to basically monetize this case?
They spend their time trying to fight against that. Normally the roles are reversed. Normally the state's putting up the hard evidence and the defense has to say, well, that's not right, this is not right, that doesn't apply. They wanted to know, well, the DNA must have been corrupted because of a rainstorm or whatever. But literally all the evidence points away from Christopher, except for the story. We've been told, or you've been told, that the defense's story, the defense is Carl Patton. We've never said that. And we've certainly never singled out Carl Patton as the only possibility. I want to share something with you that you're also going to hear in a few minutes. And this again is from the law. An interesting thing the DA said a while ago. He said, they're trying to tell you Carl Patton did this. But the standard is proof beyond reasonable doubt. They haven't given you proof beyond reasonable doubt that Carl Patton did this. Well, that's not quite how it works. The only person in this room for which the standard of proof beyond reasonable doubt applies is the defendant. Any other evidence, you're allowed to determine how you think it may apply. How it may fit the case. And this is the law that she's going to read to you in a minute. Not the law he just told you about. This is the law she's going to read to you. Of course, you have to prove everything beyond a reasonable doubt. And in a case like this one, where the only evidence against the defendant is circumstantial, our statutes and our courts have determined.
Okay, just as a weird 50,000 to even from Jupiter look, our jurisprudence system has to be the dumbest thing ever. Let me explain. Because I still like our justice system when you factor in all the other ones. But we basically have professional lacrosse players trying to, do very technical and very skilled lacrosse plays, or however you do lacrosse. And they are playing and being judged by people who have no idea what the hell lacrosse is. So things that are very important to lacrosse players are not very important to the judges. So there's this incredible disconnect between what's important to the lawyers and the law and what's important to the jury. And it just has always struck me as very, very interesting the way we've set this up, because you have the lawyers that have to satisfy all of the subsection for subsection and, on or about sort of things. Trying to relate and persuade a jury who has never faced any kind of rules like this, the very dense and sort of confusing legalese that they're supposed to judge things on. It's just this makes no sense. We're basically inviting Mo to judge the Olympics in fencing or breakdancing. Which would be hilarious, but I wouldn't know what the hell I was doing.
That this is how you should interpret beyond a reasonable doubt. You would be authorized to convict only if the evidence, whether direct or circumstantial, or both, excludes all reasonable theories of innocence and proves the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt. In other words, in a case in which there's circumstantial evidence only, you have to exclude every other reasonable possibility. And friends, that's where you do get to use your imagination. I'm not inviting you to come up with Disneyland fairy tales. No, that's being arbitrary. That's what it's actually outlaws. But if there's any other reasonable possibility to explain the death of Melissa Wolfenbarger, then you must acquit. From the evidence you have, the hard evidence you have remains You know the area she lived in. You know she was going to Doraville. You know she was riding the train. You know she was getting off that train at midnight and walking from the from the Lee Street station to Brookline or wherever else she went regularly at night, midnight in the West End. We know she was hanging out with people who were drinking a lot.
And that is the sad truth, that it does seem like Melissa was putting her in herself in an incredibly vulnerable situation with a lot of the relationships, kind of both social and people that she was just hanging out with, people that tend to be very deep into addictions or hanging out and drinking in the day, or any of those kind of things. She was basically putting herself in spots where she could have met any number of people who could have had really bad intentions toward anyone.
We know that at least, according to some people in the evidence, some of those people were doing drugs. And when drugs and alcohol are involved in anything, the pool of potential suspects is a chasm. I don't have to find one and bring it to you and say, this guy did it, and I can prove it to you beyond reasonable doubt. You just have to be able to understand it could have been anybody, and that's reasonable. And that's where people like Carl Patton do come in, and Norma Patton. The whole thing about the 5 murders and the dumping bodies in the river and the covering it up for many, many years. But we also find out that one of his victims was a drug dealer that Carl worked for. We also find out that he engaged in contract killing.
Nothing to see here, says the state. Pay no attention to the people that dumped bodies into the river.
We also find out that there was a member of their family, in some common law way, whose father Carl had killed. And he didn't find out until sometime later. The same man also hung out in that household, was friends with the Patton family, and later was accused of molesting Melissa. And Norma.
Yeah, like I said, my heart goes out to the little girl Melissa was, because it sounds like her childhood was beyond chaotic and traumatic. It sounds like she didn't have a safe place really at all. And my heart goes out to that little girl. And it sucks that the police and the people that are responsible for finding justice for this woman did such a terrible job.
And with Melissa's testimony, apparently tried to get him indicted. Does this man have a motive to get revenge against Carl? Yes. Does he have a motive to get revenge against Norma and even Melissa? Yes. Is it reasonable to believe he could have been involved? Absolutely. Is it reasonable to believe that one of her new boyfriends was involved when he found out she had a husband? When he found out or heard a rumor that she was pregnant? Is it reasonably possible that she did find out what her dad had been doing and came to him needing money, came to him with a I will expose you? Is it possible that living in that area, she got involved in a drug deal gone bad? Why would they dismember her? Dismembering is not common, but it's not unheard of even in drug dealers. It's a way to dispose of a body. It doesn't have to be ritualistic. You don't have to be Jeffrey Dahmer. And in fact, that's what the state's alleging in this case, that it was merely a means of trying to hide a body. What if she owed somebody a drug debt? Here's a possibility. How do you know that she didn't die of an overdose in somebody's house and they had criminality in their house and they panicked and tried to hide the body? Where's your evidence? It just has to be a reasonable theory. That's what the law says. You can't rule it out. There's not one of these scenarios you can rule out. And if you can't rule it out, that's a reasonable doubt. Maybe she really was pregnant. Maybe she tried to have an unsafe abortion. Where's your evidence, sir? It just has to be a reasonable fear. If the state had done more investigation, maybe we could have eliminated some of these, but we can't. You can't rule these out. Is it possible that destitute, poor, no hope, she did take her own life, and then somebody found her body and tried to get rid of it? Is it possible? The state has not ruled out any of these. It has told you a story about one possibility. It has embellished some of the details and asked you to imagine that it all went to a murder. Here's some random thoughts to consider. The bags were found in the wooded area. We heard testimony from Ms. Miller, the investigator who was there, the one who found.
You know, I've never had a closing statement with, just random nebulous thoughts I was thinking today. I love that he's doing a musings with, ponytail lawyer. Just thoughts I thought about driving in on this way, into court today. Just thought I'd regale you with them.
The first bag state that she found it right by a pathway. Now, why did they even start looking back there? She told you. She told you the owner of that trucking company said, why don't you go look back behind here, because there's a cut through that people use and a wooded area that drug dealers and other people use. That's what she said. She testified to that. And they go back there and start searching, and lo and behold, the dog actually misses it, but she spots this bag right by the trail. And we saw pictures of several of those bags that she described as being in a clearing or on the trail. Not pushed up under the brush, no attempt to hide these things. Those bags were even either thrown there to be found by somebody, or they were just haphazardly thrown there. But the least likely scenario is that someone was taking care to try to hide them. Get somebody kill Melissa and throw it where it would be found, right where Chris worked. They'll send a message. You can't rule it out. That's a reasonable doubt. The domestic violence incident expert spoke about that. Have you considered the evidence we've heard about how Melissa was raised? About how she was locked in a room? How she was, according to Ms. Waddell, stunted in her intellectual development? Unsocial?
Okay, maybe Miss Waddell, I'm not gonna lie, but I was high, may not be the witness to bring out the one who diagnosed her with, autism, because she, of course, is the Surgeon General of Guatemala. I mean, again, neither side in this case had the most stellar of witnesses.
Very easily controlled, naive. Why is it that when she goes to Kathy's house and she says, I want to turn my children over to you, and then she goes to, writes a letter to Norman and says, no, I want to give all the custody and come see you and stay away from her? Why is it that she talks that way to one side and talks a different way to the other side? Maybe she had a power and control relationship with her mother. Maybe the power and control wheel applies in that relationship too. Maybe when she went up to get her from Brookline and helped her file her police report and helped her go file the court protective order, then took her home and helped her took her to Henry County to try to get custody back. Maybe that was exactly what Wendy was telling us. She's easily controlled, and maybe that's.
I mean, it doesn't strike me as out of the realm of possibility that Melissa did have sort of a fawn reaction to her parents. And what I mean by that is if they ever got aggressive with her, she learned very early on that Norma and Carl saw themselves as the best parents in the world, the most Christian, the most godly, ignoring all of the, red rum stuff and the, well, dealing out not street legal pharmaceuticals. Uh, it it might have been that one coping mechanism or one fawn mechanism and a way to kind of redirect our parents is to overpraise for their lovely skill, in raising her. Like, you guys did a great job, Mom, you do so much. Maybe Melissa knows that when her parents are upset with her, a way to get back into their good graces is to, say, you know what, you guys did so much for me as a parent. I'm so grateful. And just acknowledging everything that they did for her, even if it wasn't true, but kind of acknowledging their narrative of how they were as parents versus reality. That could very much be a sort of adaptive behavior that has worked with Norma. And Melissa knew that. So, she only presented the very best aspects of her relationship to Norma, and Norma never had an idea what Melissa really felt, thought, or anything, because Melissa knew the words that Norma would accept and didn't want to expend any energy on fighting with her parents.
Weren't her own actions. Maybe she was being influenced by the person that used to lock her in a room every day and deprive her and control her. I think it's interesting that the incident happens in 1998, and all of the things in the power control wheel are suddenly in Melissa and Norma's favor, according to their understanding of how the law works. You remember, I asked her, did you understand that you just go down to the court and say, I want my kids back, and they get your kids back? Now, I know because I'm an attorney and I read law. Actually, we talked about it here as well in testimony. That's not quite how it works. But Norma testified that was her understanding, and it was Melissa's understanding at the time. So what happens? Melissa's with her at that time, not with Chris. Melissa went down and said, I want my kids back. So as far as they understood it, they had custody back. They had the physical custody of the kids because they had them at their home at that time for those few days. And they filed a restraining order against Chris, which would have required him to stay away from them. So according to the power control wheel, everything was in their favor, if that's what Melissa really wanted. If what Norma is telling us in her version of the story is actually true, there would have been no reason to go back with Chris whatsoever. And yet, she goes to her court date and dismisses it. Oh, that's evidence of abuse of power and control. But the power and control was with her mother. She could have easily stood up and said at that time, I'm done. I have everything I want. I don't need you. You can stay away from me.
Now, I will say, if your parent or guardian has kind of, the word groom is the only thing that came to me, but conditioned you to kind of have the ability or the training to look inwardly on yourself for every situation and make it your fault. It's not out of the realm of possibility that if you have this sort of controlling or manipulative relationship with your caregivers, that you're not going to seek that out and mirror that in romantic partners. So, there's that. Now, unfortunately, I do have to get running. I did promise Mr. Moe that I would help with the ever eternal Mount St. Laundry. So we will finish the rest of closing. We will watch a little bit of the state's lady attorney, and then we will get to the verdict because I need to start pulling all of the Sarah Boone stuff, because y'all, it is popping off with our favorite honor roller. Seems she's just not getting the warm welcome from her fellow prison inmates that you would have expected. I mean, who'd have thunk it? Sarah Boone not being particularly popular with anyone in humanity? It's a mystery. Let me see who is going to continue going today so I can send you over there. Do do do. Okay, it looks like Dolly is doing courtroom roulette, so I'm sure he will find some of the craziest cases. We go straight from, the frying pan into the fire. Yes. So I will be doing laundry because it's amazing. My kids continue to create mountains of dirty clothes no matter what we do. Thank you for joining me on the Petty Express. We do take a little bit longer to cover trials. We go at Petty Express time, but we have fun and I have bingo now, so we are onward and upward. Let's finish this case up and then get on to another case. Now, there is that decapitation case with the Super or OnlyFans model that I think just wrapped up. As I pull Sarah Boone's stuff, we might jump into that while we wait for other cases, because I've heard that one is a whole full of crazy. So have a great day. Thank you for joining me. Share with your friends. Spread the Church of Mo around. The good news, the dark chocolate, the sarcasm, and the true crime, as always. And I will see you tomorrow morning with Mornings with Mo. And then tomorrow evening, later in the evening, I believe 8 p.m., but let me double check that. I will be on with Publicly Buzzed, and we will be watching police body cam video or chase video, because holy Bob Ross, the content, the character, the absolute shenanigans of people that walk the street among us. And people wonder why I'm an inside cat. Body cam videos. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye.